Hi, my name is William Smith. Today is Friday the 13th, and we are going to cross-match patients for potential blood donation. So we have two tubes here with our EDTA. So we have our first patient, which is our donor patient, and then we have the one that we're cross-matching with that would potentially need a blood transfusion. Now, both of these samples are just regular samples. These are not sick patients in the clinic. We're just using these samples for demonstration purposes for this video. So we're gonna start off by taking these two samples and putting them in our centrifuge, and we're gonna centrifuge them down for 5 minutes so that we can separate the plasma from the red blood cells. All right, so now that we have our centrifuges done and we've separated the RBCs from the plasma, we're going to take our samples from the centrifuge. And we can see that we have our RBCs separated from our plasma. So this is on our potential donor patient. So we're going to open this up, and I've got another tube here that is labeled with her name as well. So we're going to separate out the plasma from the RBCs. So I'm going to set these down here for just a second, and I'm going to use a clean pipette to suck out the plasma, making sure not to get down into the RBC. So we're just going to remove the plasma from this sample. And we're going to put that into our white tube that has no additives or anything in it as well. And we're going to do the same thing for our donor patient. So I'm going to take this out of the centrifuge, use a different clean pipette. And again, we're going to separate the plasma from the RBCs. All right, so our next step is we are going to wash our RBCs, and we're going to do this a total of 3 times. And to do this, we're going to take our RBCs that we have in our vials, and we're going to use some sterile normal saline. So I've got this in our fluid bag here, so we're going to take this. And we're going to fill up our tube with the RBCs in it with that normal saline. And we're going to do this for both our donor and our recipient. And you're going to fill this up about 3/4 of the way to wash our RBCs. And again, we're going to do this 3 times. All right, so now that we've washed our 2 samples 3 times at 1 minute each in the centrifuge. So we filled it up with saline, spun it for 1 minute in the centrifuge, siphoned off the saline, and repeated that step 3 different times. We are going to resuspend our RBCs, and to do that, we are going to take 1 drop of our RBCs from each sample, and we are going to add it to 20 drops of our saline. So I'm going to grab another tube here. So I have 2 new tubes. I'm going to make sure I label them correctly. So we're going to have Mick Jagger, who is our donor. And then I've got Penelope, who is our recipient. And again, I'm going to use new clean pipettes, and I'm going to do 1 drop first of our RBCs from Mick Jagger here. And then I'm going to do 1 drop in this tube from Penelope. All right, and then so to each of those, I'm going to add 20 drops of our saline. Okay, so now that I have all of those together, we are going to have 3 more tubes that are going to be separated as our major, our minor, and our control. So what we're going to do is we're going to add to our major, we're going to add 1 drop of our donor RPCs to our recipient's plasma. And then for the minor, we're going to add 1 drop of our recipient's RPCs to 2 drops of our donor's plasma. And then for our control, we're going to do 1 drop of our donor's RBCs to 1 drop of our recipient's RBCs to 1 drop of our recipient's plasma. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of that now. So I'm going to start with our major. So for major, we're going to use our resuspended RBCs here, and we're going to do 1 drop of this suspension. Okay. So I have it labeled as our major, so we know. And then we're going to use 2 drops of the plasma from our recipient. So I used Mick Jagger's RBCs, and we're going to add in Penelope's plasma. So we're going to do 2 drops of that. Perfect. All right, and while I have this out, I'm going to go ahead and do my control. So I'm going to put 2 drops of the plasma in my control as well. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to do my minor, which is 1 drop of our recipient's RPCs. So this one here. To 2 drops of our donor's plasma. All right, so we're going to put all these lids back on these so that they stay intact. And then our control, we just added in our recipient's RBCs to the recipient's plasma so that we have that control so we can watch. At this point, we are going to let these sit and incubate for 15 minutes at room temperature. And just before then, we're just gonna mix them together just a little bit, swirl them together so that we have a nice mixed sample. All right, so we're gonna let these sit now for 15 minutes. All right, so our samples have sat for 15 minutes. So now what we're going to do is put them back in the centrifuge just briefly for about 15 seconds. So that way we can examine our samples for our agglutinin. See if these patients would be compatible. So just very briefly, we're gonna spin these. All right, so our first sample is going to be our minor sample. So we're just gonna look for some hemolysis on there, and it looks like we do have some hemolysis in our sample there. And you can see like our red blood cells have kind of gone down to the bottom like they should be after spinning them down. This is our major sample. Again, a little bit of hemolysis, but not bad. And then last we have our control sample. So we've got that in there. So now we're going to gently resuspend these into our, so we're just gonna tap them and resuspend the RBCs, and we're gonna look for that aggregation. So we wanna see if these are little clumping spots or not. So we can kind of look and see, looks like we do have some of that on there in those. So that would be the macroscopic. You can just tap this together again to mix those together. And again, like you can see in there. Right, and then as always, our control should be perfectly normal back and mixed together. All right, so next we're going to put a drop of this on the on a slide so that we can look under the microscope and see how these are going to look under the microscope, looking for micro. So we'll put a drop on each and put a cover slip over it so we can take a look. And then once we examine that, we can determine whether or not these two patients are compatible for cross-matching. All right, and that's how we do our blood cross-match.